You know that feeling when you open your phone, see a wall of messages, a string of notifications, a few half-finished plans, and a social space that somehow expects you to be available, expressive, polished, and responsive all at once. And instead of feeling connected, you just feel tired? Not dramatic tired, not the kind that comes from one long day, something quieter than that. A kind of internal resistance, like a part of you has started stepping back without making a scene. A lot of people misread that kind of distance. They call it disinterest, laziness, detachment, even arrogance sometimes. But for many people, especially younger ones, it is not a random personality flaw. It is a pattern, a very human one. And lately, Gen Z has been showing that pattern in a way that people keep noticing, but not always understanding. There is more going on here than people realize. What looks like rejection is often a nervous system response. What looks like indifference is often fatigue. What looks like not caring is sometimes a quiet refusal to keep performing in spaces that feel too loud, too artificial, or too demanding. Psychology has been circling this for years. When people live for long periods under pressure to present themselves, manage impressions, stay reachable, and remain constantly visible, the mind starts looking for ways to conserve energy. The brain is not interested in being admired every second. It is interested in staying regulated, staying safe, staying coherent. And that is part of why so many younger people seem to be stepping away from the things older generations treated as normal. Not because they are broken, not because they are antisocial, but because something in them has learned to recognize the cost. A lot of Gen Z grew up inside a world that never really paused. They were raised with screens, comparisons, endless commentary, public identity, and the strange pressure of being watched while still figuring out who they were. That matters. Because when a person develops inside an environment where attention feels constant, the nervous system adapts. Sometimes it becomes hyper-aware. Sometimes it becomes guarded. Sometimes it starts saying, very quietly, I do not want this much exposure anymore. That is not a rebellion for the sake of rebellion. It is often adaptation. There is a reason so many younger people seem less interested in broadcasting every part of their life, less interested in pretending they are always fine, less interested in the old script that said you prove your value by being visible, productive, and socially smooth at all times. A growing number of them are rejecting the performance itself, not connection, performance. And those two things are not the same. Real connection has room for silence. Performance does not. Real connection allows someone to be unfinished, unfiltered, and slightly awkward. Performance asks for an edited version of the self. A version that smiles on command, replies quickly, and keeps the mood light. For people who have spent years in environments where authenticity was punished or misunderstood, that kind of social acting becomes exhausting very quickly. Neuroscience helps explain why. The brain is constantly scanning for effort, reward, and threat. When a behavior starts producing more stress than relief, the system naturally pulls back. If being online, over-socialized, or always available begins to feel like an endless demand with little emotional return, the brain starts treating it like a drain. That does not happen because someone is weak. It happens because the nervous system is trying to protect energy. And for many younger people, that protection looks like withdrawing from things that older culture assumed would always be desirable. The constant posting, the endless sharing, the pressure to turn every experience into content, the expectation that life should be visible to be real. Gen Z is quietly questioning all of it. A lot of this began long before anyone had words for it. Some people grew up in homes where emotional space was limited. Some grew up watching adults chase stability and never really find it. Some watch social media turn identity into a public scoreboard. Some learned very early that attention can be rewarding, but also invasive. So later, when they step back, it is not always a rejection of people. It is often a response to overexposure. When a child learns that being seen can lead to criticism, pressure, or misunderstanding, they often become selective about visibility. That selectiveness can look like privacy. It can look like silence. It can look like refusal. But underneath, it is often intelligence. The mind learns where it feels safest to exist. That is why this pattern should not be romanticized, and it should not be mocked either. It is not better to be hyperconnected, and it is not better to disappear. Different people are wired differently, and different environments shape different survival strategies. Some people feel energized by community and constant exchange. Others feel more alive when they are not being pulled in 10 directions at once. Neither side is wrong. The mistake is assuming that everyone is built for the same level of exposure. One of the most interesting parts of this shift is that it carries a paradox. On the surface, it looks like Gen Z is becoming less engaged, but in many cases, they are becoming more intentional. They are not rejecting meaning. They are rejecting noise. They are not rejecting relationships. They are rejecting forced access. They are not rejecting life. They are rejecting the idea that a life has to be publicly consumable in order to matter. That has a hidden strength. People who learn to step back often develop a very sharp sense of what is real. They notice tone faster. They notice insincerity faster. They notice when something is performative. They are less likely to be impressed by surface-level confidence and more likely to value honesty, clarity, and emotional safety. But there is a cost, too. When you pull back from noisy spaces for too long, it can become hard to trust them again. The same sensitivity that helps you see through performance can also make you wary of closeness. The same self-protection that preserves your energy can also make you feel separate from people who seem perfectly comfortable participating in the old social game. That is the trade-off. Quiet people often look calm because they are conserving themselves. But inside that calm, there is usually a very active awareness. They are noticing what others miss. They are evaluating what feels genuine. They are choosing carefully where to place their attention, because attention is not cheap anymore. It never really was. And maybe that is the part people are just beginning to understand. A lot of the behaviors being labeled as Gen Z attitude are really signs of a generation trying to protect its inner life. Trying to build boundaries around a world that asks to be let in constantly. Trying to survive an era where being reachable can become a full-time burden. Trying, in its own way, to reclaim the right to be private, unpolished, and unperformed. That does not make them cold. It makes them tired of pretending. It makes them more honest than they are sometimes given credit for. And it makes a strange kind of sense, because when people have spent enough time inside overstimulation, they eventually begin to crave simplicity. Not emptiness, simplicity. Fewer expectations, fewer masks, fewer places where they have to split themselves into a public version and a private one. That is not a sign that something is wrong. It is often a sign that something deeper is trying to heal. So if this feels familiar, it is probably because part of you has already started to notice the same thing. You are not imagining the shift. You are just paying attention to it before many other people do. And there is another layer to that too. The same person who pulls away from the crowd is often the one who sees the crowd most clearly.